Hey everyone, on today's podcast, I'm actually sitting down with Laura, who runs all of our paid advertising here at the Full Sail agency side of things, because she grew up in a household where the family business kind of ran the house as well. So we're talking about some of the family lines and how to pretty much not get stuck in the rut of bringing business home and affecting the whole family. So if you got a family business, check this one out. Hey everyone, welcome back to Contractor Growth Network. This is Logan Shinholster, and today, instead of being joined by Alex, I actually have Laura with us. And who Laura is she runs over at Full Sail Marketing, our agency, she runs all the Facebook, Google, and YouTube advertising. So Laura, welcome.
Thank you for having me on today.
You're welcome. So what we're talking about today is Laura's got a very interesting backstory. And candidly, I don't know if Laura even knows this, but when she was explaining her background of everything, this was probably the number one reason that I hired her. As she started with us, it's now end of November. When did you start? End of August?
Around there, so it's been about like 3-4 months.
Yeah, 3 months. Yeah, whatever it is. But when you explained everything about your backstory and where you came from, family-wise, I was like, okay, I'm in. I can do it with this girl, because the skill side of knowing Facebook ads and Google ads, that would all be brand new. But the work ethic was really why I hired you.
Thank you.
Did you know that?
I think you mentioned it once, maybe a month or two after I started.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay. So, Laura, go ahead and tell us who you are and give us a bit of a backstory into everything.
Okay, so my name's Laura Pholsina. I'm 22, just recently graduated from UNC Charlotte in spring 2019. I was born in Providence, Rhode Island, but I grew up down here in North Carolina most of my life. But where my family's from, my parents, they came from Laos, Asia, which is a small country, third world country between Thailand and Vietnam. And so basically just to bring back, all the way back to where, from my parents, they lived in Laos. They were born there. They lived there during the Vietnam War. And so they wanted to escape Laos because of the war happening. The government was corrupt. And so starting from my mom's side, very briefly, she moved from Laos to Thailand with her family and stayed in a refugee camp. Mm-hmm. And then she was there until I think the age of 16 and came to America with her family.
So the refugee camp. So she leaves Laos because of the war. And how much is the Vietnam War affecting the country of Laos during this time?
I mean, it's a lot, especially because from both sides, my mom and my dad, their parents or their fathers were in the military, so they did a lot, especially on my dad's side. Yeah. So apparently what happened was, if, communism was taking over Laos, if they knew you were in the military, you would get executed. And so from my mom's side, at least, from what they've told me, my grandfather, he had to hide all of his military things, like his uniforms, etc. And they both had farms, so they dug a hole in the ground in the farm and dug it up and hid it, so people wouldn't find out he was in the military, so he wouldn't get killed.
So communism's spreading, and what year is this, or what time frame are we looking at?
I'm not exactly sure. Yeah, around there, 60s, 70s.
Yeah. Okay. So the communism's coming in, and then they go, okay, if you're in the military, because you're probably trying to squash anything that has remnants of the past era, they're coming, they're finding you, and you're out.
Yes.
Okay, so you're both is it your dad? Oh, it's your grandfather that was pretty big in the military.
Yes. At least I'm not too sure about on my mom's side how big he was, but I know on my dad's side he was very well known. So that would come into play about my dad's side of the story, how he came here. But for my mom, they left Laos, went to Thailand. They stayed there for a few years, and then they came to America. You need, I forgot what the word is, but someone has to, I guess, sponsor you.
Yeah.
Yes, to come to America. So they were waiting on that. That's why they would stay at the refugee camps. And then for my dad's side of the story, I feel like it's a little bit more intense, at least from what my dad told me. So he was younger than my mom. I'd say he was in Laos and he had to escape it. So he left in the middle of the night. And to say he has like 11 siblings, other
Mm-hmm.
siblings, but he left by himself this one night. I think some of them were already in Thailand waiting for him.
How old was he, do you think?
Around, I know he came to America around, he was 11 or 10, so he was very young, probably 8, I
Mm-hmm.
believe. And so his dad, my grandfather's already in Thailand waiting for him. And so he had to escape on these boats. And
Mm-hmm.
how he tells me is like, there are 2 boats, you get on one of them. And because he was a kid, this young couple took care of him while they were on the boat. And so the boats went separate ways. And then the one boat, he remember he heard like gunshots.
Mm-hmm.
And so he was like, I don't know if those people ever made it to Thailand. But his boat made it eventually to Thailand with like him, the young couple, and like other people.
Mm-hmm.
And they had to wait until someone came to rescue them. So it was late at night. They dug holes in the sand and slept there. And then I think the cops from Thailand came and got them,
Mm-hmm.
brought them to their jail cell. And was like, you can't leave until someone comes picks you up, like someone that they know.
Mm-hmm.
And so because my grandfather was so big in the military, he came by, picked up my dad. And then my dad was like, till this day, he wished he knew where that young couple, where they're at now today, because they took care of him and he's so grateful for that. So yeah, that was my dad's whole story. If you tried to escape, you get caught, you get executed.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know how long he was in Thailand, but eventually he came to America at the age of 10 or 11.
Mm-hmm.
And then, both my parents, they started school here. So I guess like continuing the story after escaping Laos, they started school here. None of them knew English. And then I guess going back to my mom's side, this is another thing. She started school not knowing English at all, and so she had to learn. And my parents, they speak English quite well today, so it was just a struggle. They had no money as well. My mom would tell me how they would have to go to church and get clothes from there, and then when they went to school, people would make fun of them because they didn't have nice clothes, they couldn't speak English. And so that was like their upbringing. That's what they grew up
Mm-hmm.
going through. And then eventually, my parents met in Rhode Island. My dad like saw my mom at a laundromat, and it was like, she's the one.
Mm-hmm.
And he was chasing after her for some time until they eventually, mom was like, okay,
Yeah.
let's date.
Fine, let's
Yeah.
date, yeah.
And then they had my sister and then me. They were like in their early 20s. And so I guess continue the story too. Where we lived in Providence, Rhode Island, it's it's the smallest state in the United States, and it wasn't a good area at all. Like around the corner from where our house was, you would get shot.
Mm-hmm.
So it's very dangerous. The school system was terrible, and my mom said, I don't want our kids to grow up in this environment. So we had family down here in Mooresville, North Carolina, South Carolina, all that. And we came to visit. My parents loved the weather.
Mm-hmm.
It's not snowing all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And then it was just a better environment. So my mom told my dad one day, it's like, you know what? I'm going to pack the kids, pack everything, even though we don't have much. We're going to move down here so the kids can have a better environment to grow up in. And my dad wanted to stay, but then my mom's like, well, I'm going to go,
Right.
And so, we all came down, and we only had, my mom told me, only like a couple $1,000s. Like we didn't have much. We ended up living at my aunt's house for a bit, and all 4 of us stayed in one small room. It was a laundry room, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
That's where we slept for a few months until we got our own place. But we didn't have much. And so years later, and the recession hit. My dad, he ended up losing his job because he was newer he's a mechanic. He
Mm-hmm.
worked for Honda for many years, which is another part of his backstory. And he ended up switching from one Honda to another. And because I think there's a recession, and the person that owned that Honda store, or the shop, he got caught in like fraud or something like that, and so he knew he was gonna get fired because he was one of the first like newer people.
Mm-hmm.
And so he just quit, and he was like jobless for a while. I remember we didn't have much money. My sister was starting college around that time, and so my dad was like, you know what, I've been wanting to do this for a long time. I want to open my own business, like open my own mechanic shop. He didn't agree with like, he worked for Honda for so long. He's met people, been in other places beside Honda, and he's like, yeah, most of these people, some of them don't have good ethics. Like
Mm-hmm.
their ethical behavior, they'll do things, they'll try to sell you things that you don't need. And he's like, I don't want to do that. So he's like, I'm gonna do this like on my own. And so he started the business. I was middle school, 12, 13. And so it was very slow at first because, you know, it's a recession and there were days when no one would come in. I helped my dad out. I worked there from the beginning all the way until I graduated high school. So, but then, you know, it's been 5, 6 years, more than 6 years possibly. The business has grown. We have, you know, customers that come back all the time, and it's in the small town of downtown Mooresville, so like a lot of people go there and they know my family, and now my mom works there, so it's just, you know, the family business. Yeah.
So that, I mean, it's obviously like one of the crazier stories because, like, you know, I mean, I grew up like my dad's a contractor, but like it was all good. What's it like? Because with most people that start their own business, or like most contractors, like they come from a very, it's a tougher background, right? They didn't grow up with a silver spoon. They grew up where money is scarce, and when you run a business, it's very, very different. Your mindset towards this stuff when you grow up with nothing versus when you grow up where like the world's your oyster. So when it comes to running a business and opening this stuff, I mean, your dad came from not. I mean, he was sleeping in sand.
Yeah.
And then now he's got his own business. What's it like for him to operate the business, or like from your side of things, when you see how he approaches money, or you see how he approaches the business as a whole? Is he very like open-minded of like, yeah, let's try all these new things and be very like, yeah, screw it, we'll try it? Or is it very like, well, I don't want to lose any money, so let me go ahead and just like do everything I can to limit my losses?
I mean, my dad, you know, like technology-wise, things are changing all the time. It's kind of the same with cars. You know, back then it was just a key put in the ignition, but now there's like push to start.
Right.
And he's willing to try new things, and he knows like he has to take a test every year or something like that to learn new things. And so he's okay with that. But with my parents, they've done finance in the past too, and their thing was they always said to my sister and I was like, don't spend more than like what you need. Like don't live beyond your means. I think that's the saying. Yeah. So I mean, I think they're pretty good with money. Yeah.
So what was it like on those days when there's nobody coming into the shop?
I remember those days. It was at the very beginning, maybe the first year or two. My dad he would just sit there in the office area with me. I was the receptionist, and so we just sit there. And I felt, you know, it was kind of heartbreaking for me to see my dad because, you know, obviously he did this also for the family. He wanted to like get us money and like build us, and my parents' goal was like for my sister and I to have a better future than what they had. And so it was just kind of heartbreaking. And we would just sit there. Sometimes we'd close early. There were literally days when no one would come in. So it was just sit there, have lunch, and then it's like, okay, we're closing early. We're going to go home. And that was it.
Because when you have a shop, I mean, there's also overhead. Like, you can't just like, oh yeah, when somebody comes in, you know, it costs me money to like, you know, change the oil or like whatever it is. You're still having fixed overhead that whether you get 100 people in that day or 0 people, you still got to pay for the shop. So it's like you're sitting there and the money is just slowly draining out no matter how many people you get in the day.
Yeah, it was a rough few years, but I mean, that's what they also say about startup companies. It might take like a couple years to start making profits, but I think it was more of because we were new, it was in the recession, and people didn't really know us. But then people, when they would come in, they realized, oh, this is a family business, you know, I love that, and they want to support us. And my dad, you know, like I said, he wanted to do everything right. He didn't want to tell people, hey, you need this even though you don't need it, or I don't know. But people really enjoyed that and liked that about him, so they would come back. So the business did grow from then.
So your mom during this time, there's really what I find is there's 2 scenarios with contractors when they start their own business. There's 2 scenarios that the spouses go through. One is they're very supportive. 2 is they're supportive, but they're not giving the contractors the time or the support that they need to get this thing going. Meaning they go, yep, I support you. I want this thing to work, but this thing better work in the next 2 months or else you're going to get a job. So it's almost like a pseudo support. So your mom during this time, how is she handling all this? Because she's got 2 kids to feed.
Yeah.
Your dad's sitting there. There's nobody coming in. I mean, what's her mindset during this?
I mean, she was very supportive of my dad,
Mm-hmm.
because when he became a mechanic, she was there from the beginning. It was like, I support you. They actually, my mom told me this story. They actually sat down together. It was like, okay, if you are actually going to become a mechanic, you need to specialize in one of these cars. And you want to pick a car that a lot of people drive. And so, like, they drive it, they'll come to you to get it fixed.
Mm-hmm.
So she was very supportive from the beginning. Because he ended up opening his own shop, and it was very slow at the beginning. My mom was like, well, she's a beautician, she did hair, so she kept doing her job as well. So this is what happened during the day. I was 12, 13. During the day I was in school. My mom
Mm-hmm.
would be at the shop with my dad as like keeping things clean, pick up the phone, taking people in, and then by the time school is out, she'll come pick me up, I'll come and replace her, and she'd go to work. So she'd work all day with my dad and then
Mm-hmm.
go into her hair cutting job until like 9 p.m. She wouldn't get home until like 9:30, 10 p.m. And then we'd have dinner, and that was the day. And that was like that for many years. So she was very supportive of him.
So with you, so you're reading the E-Myth Contractor.
Mm-hmm.
So like I've read the E-Myth. I never read the contractor specific
Mm-hmm.
one. I grew up in a contracting household, but after reading the E-Myth and then running my own business, we're all the same.
Yes.
So for you in there, when you're reading that, how much of in the E-Myth, the contractor edition, how much of what you're reading is actually the scenario that you grew up in growing up?
It's actually quite relatable because, especially like from the first chapter, it talks about, you have your business and then you have your family. And then depending how much your family actually spends with the business helping
Mm-hmm.
out, or if they don't help out at all, like either way, it's going to be a family business because whatever you do at work, say you have trouble communicating with your employees,
Mm-hmm.
you might have trouble communicating at home. And also, it's just like all the time, most likely, the money you're making at work is like what you're using to feed your family, put
Right.
a roof over their head. So it's like if you're not doing well there, you're probably stressed at work, you're probably stressed out at home.
Mm-hmm. And that's I'm glad you brought that up because that is exactly like a lot of the people that we talk to, if like contractors, if you have a marketing budget, like we can work with that.
Mm-hmm.
But if every single month your mindset is, well, I can either pay them a couple grand or I could take my family on vacation,
Mm-hmm.
it's a whole different mindset because when you own your own business, whatever you're making, that's what goes into the family's pockets. You don't get a salary. You don't have to budget for, unless you're like on like a W-2 because you're an S corp or whatever it is. But for the most part, whatever you're making, that's what you get to spend at home.
Mm-hmm.
So for your family, your parents, what, like, would you know when times were good? Because like at home, like, they would be like a little bit nicer or like you'd get like some more stuff, or was it always pretty much the same whether your dad was making a lot of money versus nobody was coming in the shop? It was always just live below your means.
I could tell, at least from the beginning, it was the amount of food we had.
Uh-huh.
My mom, she would always make home cooked meals, and especially now that my sister was off in college, she wasn't there most of the time. There was less food, but I could tell that my parents were trying to like, we aren't making a lot of money. We just opened up this shop.
Mm-hmm.
Let's have a budget. But then as the business did grow years and years, my parents were, we went on vacation. We bought more food. We had like nicer things, I guess you can say. So that's how I could tell.
So what's it like for you as a kid when you hear this? Like, hey, guys, dad's going to start a business.
Mm-hmm.
Times are tight, so we're going to have to cut down on food.
Mm-hmm.
Not cut down on Netflix accounts or
Mm-hmm.
cut down on vacations or cars that we're going to buy
Yeah.
you. It's cut down on, like, aside from oxygen,
Mm-hmm.
the next thing that you need in life.
Yeah.
Can you like understand what's going on?
I mean, at least for me, because my parents, they're very open about like where they came from, our money situation and all that. I mean, my parents, they just made sure there was food on the table, there was a roof over our head. We had the necessities that we needed, but I knew just like the amount that we were eating compared to what we had before there was a difference, but then it did change as the business grew. So it wasn't like we didn't have enough to eat, but I could just tell there were cuts from here
Right.
to there.
So it's almost like they're like rationing a little bit. I got you.
Yeah.
And then as far as like the emotional side of things, I mean, when times are tight, are they coming home? Is your dad coming home all frustrated and pissed off? Or was he pretty good at like separating work from the family? I mean, can you kind of walk me through that?
He would come home stressed sometimes, and I know my mom brought this up too. She told him, she was like, hey, you need a, if you're really stressed, you can't bring that back home because then it makes me stressed, and then the kids will get stressed. So there were times like that, but my parents, my mom at least, she was very good at communicating with him on like what needed to be done and how she was like, how she was feeling. And then my dad is very like, yes, of course, like, you're right. He would realize it. Like, he wouldn't realize it at first until my mom would say it. So
From that side of things, would he just like what would he do? Do you know, to like separate the two, or would he just like bottle it up, or would he like whatever stresses from the day? Because I know for me, like if I get stressed out at work, I go home and I just bottle everything up because I look at it as, well, I don't want to complain because then I'm just bringing her down and it's a whole thing. So I just like literally just bottle it all up. Does your dad, did he have an outlet for the stress?
I think at the beginning, my dad was like that. He would kind of bottle it up. He wouldn't lash out at my mom or anybody. But I mean, as years went by, he tried to become healthier, like have a healthier lifestyle. So he started working out and going to the gym and playing sports again because he used to play soccer. So he got into tennis and soccer. So I think that's his outlet right now.
Okay, so he's like taking whatever goes on and just putting it into the healthier stuff like exercise. Okay.
Yeah.
I got you. So, with this book, what else have you learned with the E-Myth as a whole?
I mean, they did bring up family a lot, also money. I mean, that was basically it. That's what I got from it. And I was like I said before, is like, even if you have like business and a family, you try to separate it, it's always going to come back together. Because it's like, it's your livelihood for most people. So I think that's it.
And then do you ever go back? I mean, like, when was the last time you like went and worked in your dad's shop?
Sometimes when I go back to Mooresville, my mom, she's there with him all the time now. Now that, both of us are grown and now the house, my sister and I go back there. Sometimes she's like, oh, I want to run to the store, have a little break. And I'm like, okay. And I'll work for an hour or two. And that's about it. Because now my sister and I, we both have like jobs, full-time jobs. My sister has a baby, so we don't have time to really help at the shop as much as we used to.
So I know for me, like I'm still very involved with my dad's company, as you know, like I talk to him probably almost every day. Growing up with that, helping out every summer was go out there. I was the quote unquote rock bitch, which what that means is in the world of like ponds and water features, they would dump off like tons of gravel. So somebody has to take the gravel from the front yard to the backyard. So I was always, because I was like the summer help, I was low man on the totem pole. So I would just spend the days taking a shovel, picking up the gravel, putting it into a bucket, walking the bucket to the backyard for the whole time. Or like, all right, Logan, here's all the rocks that I need. Go get them. So that was literally my job, was just that every single summer.
Rocks.
It was literally just rocks. Like that was my gig. It worked for exercise, but it wasn't like I got to like do, like I didn't do all the sexy stuff. I didn't get to like build a waterfall, or like I think eventually by the end of it I got to put like the plumbing together, but that was after like 7 summers of it. So like, yeah, great. So and then now with, but I also like grew up in that world, so I understand that like there's like a whole other side of the business. So it's like when we do all the marketing stuff for contractors, or we try to teach them, it's more of like a holistic approach, because like for you, when we're like, oh yeah, like what's the ad spend? Like you kind of have a background seeing what your dad went through. So you can't just like blow through the budget just to wing it. So it does, I know for me at least, it helps a lot with that. So I kind of understand both sides of the business, with the whole marketing and sales side, but on the back end to understand that if we get them a bunch of leads, can they even do this? It's like with your dad, like if you started like a Facebook campaign for him and all of a sudden you brought in 100 new cars at a time, would he even be able to backfill that?
No. That'd be too many cars.
It'd be way too many cars. So understanding that there's a whole other side of the business other than just the marketing has been, like, I know for me at least, super helpful, and it allows me to like be empathetic to a lot of situations, because I know I'm naturally not a very empathetic person, but it does help to kind of see how does everything go together? How does the customer service side of things factor into marketing? How does the accounting and bookkeeping factor into the marketing? So it's kind of a cool background for me, at least, to like understand how the whole business works versus just understanding like all you got to do is just run a promotion and you're done, because that's great. But if you run a promotion that puts you in the red and you continue to run that, the business goes out of business very quickly. So that's a big part of like why when you came in, you were like, yep, this is my background. I grew up like my dad owns his own shop. And I was like, okay, cool. Because at the end of the day, every small business is like the same. Like we all have problems hiring. Like, does your dad work alone or does he have people that help him?
He basically works on the cars alone, and then my mom handles the office, but sometimes he'll bring family in and teach them how to do things, or he'll try to train people. But most of the time, they wouldn't stay that long, so it's usually just him.
So why? Like because he doesn't want them? Because they're not good? They're not reliable?
Most of the time, he does, like, because he's touching the car. It's his work, He's reliable for everything. Every so often, we'll have, like, family that's like, yeah, I would like to learn. So he tries to teach them his tips and tricks. But most of the time, he's like, this is my business. I'm basically the face. Like, everyone knows who I am when they come in. I talk to them. And they know I'm the one touching their car. So whatever happens to them, it's on me.
Right.
So he wants to be sure everything's okay.
So... And that's like everybody, like literally every single like contractor's in like for me, like it's tough to give up little tasks in the business with the understanding that like, look, Logan, like I can't do everything. So you're going to have to like bring people in, teach them how to do it and let them fail, because if I just like, micromanage the rest of the time, then I don't have a business. I just have a job of micromanaging people. And then as soon as I step out, whether it's, in a couple years, if it's 20 years, whatever it is, doesn't matter. It's, then the business falls apart. So that's literally what every single person goes through. Like with Alex, I talked to Alex with his dad who does the oil delivery. His dad's whole thing was, it's tough finding the right people to do it.
Yeah.
Because like, okay, for example, with your dad, what if you bring somebody in? Like, what would your dad do if you brought somebody in, taught them everything, and the person messed up?
I don't know. He'll probably just, like, talk to them, like, hey, this is what you did wrong. This is what you need to do next time. And I guess if it keeps happening, he'll probably fire them. Or at least my mom will be like, hey, she'll step in like, hey, this guy keeps messing up. This is our business. You might have to let him go. But that was one of the things, too, especially me sitting up front all the time. People would come in, give me their resume and say, hey, are you hiring? I'm like, no, not at the moment. And I did ask my dad, I'm like, why won't you hire anyone? Especially when the business started growing. He would get backtracked for like 2 weeks. He would get booked. And he was like, well, most of these people have been trained, but I don't know if they were trained properly. So if they end up messing up, then that's on me. And as well as I would have to retrain them, which is a lot. And so he was like, I'd rather get someone new, kind of like how you did with me. He's like, I'd rather get someone new and teach them at least the way I would like it and the right way. So that's why he never really hired anyone new. There's
a guy that was actually on the CSA podcast a couple days ago, and he runs a bunch of hair salons, like 5 different hair salons. And what he did one day was, I think he fired the entire staff one day. So it was like back to just him. And at that day, he said, you know what? I will never hire a hairstylist that has experience. I will only ever hire them fresh out of cosmetology school, because otherwise they come in with all this other baggage, all this. It's kind of like hiring a sales rep. Like when you get a fresh person that is brand new out of college or brand new out of high school, whatever it is, and you teach them how to sell, they can do that. But if you take a sales rep that has 10 years of experience and 10 years of doing it one way, and you go, okay, great, we're going to totally change it up, they like never last.
Yeah, they're probably like, I already know what I'm doing.
Yeah, and that's like the problem that a lot of times it happens. So like I personally love like the entry level people to come in and go, look, like you're younger, you're gonna have to learn a lot of stuff, and it's gonna put a lot more pressure on me. But it puts like the longevity of Laura now is like way longer because of the fact that you didn't come with all this Facebook stuff. Because if you come in with Facebook knowledge, I say, well, we do this one way, and you're like, well, that doesn't work at all.
Yeah.
Now I either have to go, okay, great, you do it your way, or I got to piss you off and say, well, we're not doing it your way. So it's a much easier like transition just to have somebody new, because you don't know any better.
Mm-hmm.
So what I say is kind of like the gospel, and you go from there.
Yes, and Billie Jean.
And Billy, yeah, we do a lot of what he does. But yeah, it's just like, to get fresh people to bring him in, it's a lot easier in my mind, at least, to like suck it up, train you guys, go through the formal, here's our company values, here's our goals, here's our this kind of stuff, instead of just like throwing you in the ring and just going, all right, you figure it out, Facebook ads, watch a couple YouTube videos, and you're on.
Yeah, that's what I was thankful for, because, me being straight out of college with a marketing degree, there's so many people that do marketing from where I'm from, and we're in Charlotte, so it's a very, finance marketing city. People were like, oh, we want someone with this degree, but with like 4 years of experience, and so no one was willing to train anyone. So it was like, I'm very thankful for that. Just like it's Thanksgiving, like almost Thanksgiving. But yeah, I guess, from that, I guess I have a question for you, Logan. So, working with your dad and, your brothers, I believe, right? Did you ever have like problems being in, it's a family business?
So my dad, as a whole, he was a good boss. I remember he tells a story. I don't remember this at all, but he tells this story. I think I blocked it out of my memory. And so we're moving a rock one time, a heavy ass rock, and he does everything by hand. And apparently, what happened was I dropped the rock on his thumb.
Oh.
And I don't remember it again. He apparently just started screaming at me about how I dropped this rock on his thumb. And he said that was the last time I've ever yelled at somebody. And he said, I realized the only reason why I yelled at him being me, was because it's my son.
Yeah.
He's like, if this was a normal worker, I wouldn't say anything. But because it's my son, I just unloaded into him. And maybe I blocked it out of my memory because I don't remember it. But he tells the story enough. So problems-wise, there weren't really any. You knew. Like we always, like our lifestyle didn't really change much. He started his company in 01. Even during, like, crazy enough, during 07, 08, 09, like that era, he actually grew. Like he made more money each year during that time frame. With ponds.
Surprised.
Yeah, isn't that crazy? Because like you think like, oh, during the recession, like people got to go to mechanic, like they got to drive.
Yeah.
But do people really need a $60,000 pond? Probably not. But what we did, that was actually what he did, which was super great, was that he made himself, quote unquote, recession proof because of his clientele. So during that time, the people who he usually goes to, which are the people that have always saved their whole life, have always done the right stuff, they can still afford it because they've done the right moves. They're not buying a pond on credit.
Yeah.
So we knew, like, oh, yeah, every year he would go, well, this year is not going to be as good as last year, but problems wise, like, I didn't really have any because he was just like pretty easy to work with. So now there's definitely, like, the way that I see things and the way that he sees things as far as running a business is very different. As a 28-year-old guy who's, going into year 3 of their business versus a 63-year-old guy who has, he built his first company up to like $15 million a year, sold that, and then now this one is way smaller, but he's got 40 years of experience of running a business, 35 years of that under his belt. So 3 years versus 35 years, we butt heads a lot. So that would be the biggest problem.
Yeah, I think the reason why I brought that up is because, for me at least, when my dad opened this, I started at a very young age, 11, 12 years old. I was in middle school, I believe, when he opened it and started running it. And from middle school all the way until I graduated, I worked with him every day. And so the routine, my mom worked with my dad. Once like 3 p.m. hit, I would be at the shop working until, I think we closed at 6 p.m. back in the day. And we were open 7 days a week. It wasn't, nowadays my dad has the shop closed on the weekends because, they're chilling, the kids are out of the house, they have time and money now. But we were open 7 days a week. I worked there morning and night, and especially on the weekends. And my problem was, I was a kid, and I wanted to hang out with my friends. I played basketball for 6 years. I wanted to join the basketball team, but because my dad opened the shop, couldn't practice, couldn't stay after school, couldn't be on the team, just sat at the shop on the computer all day. And then going to high school, I was in ROTC all 4 years. I wanted to do drill team, color guard, all that, but I couldn't because I had to work. And being a teenager, going through puberty at that time too, I I was, once you hit puberty, I feel like, at least for me, I was angry at the world. And looking back on it, it was so ridiculous. But I was like angry at my parents at like for some period of my time, because I was like, they took away my childhood. I had to work all the time, stuck at the shop, and it'd get dark outside. I couldn't do anything. I'd go home. It was like literally school, work, home every day, 7 days a week. And I was very sad because I was like, I want to hang out with my friends. But now, I'm older now. As I got further into high school and I got out of college, I look back on it. I'm like, I'm actually very thankful that my parents did this, because if it wasn't for them, I wouldn't be where I am today. I wouldn't have had like a roof over my head, food on the table. I wouldn't have been able to go to college. So yeah, that was like my problem back in the day. But me as a teenager.
Well, I feel like a bitch now. What's your problem, Logan? Oh, well, I got yelled at one time. Yeah, yeah. So yeah, well now I'm like, I don't know how to follow that one up. But yeah, I never had that. I never had like the whole, because it was super like, because he had ran that first business that was like really successful. I don't really remember it, but like apparently I never saw him. Like up until the age of 5 when he sold it, never saw him. I think the only time that I would see him would be because he would leave super early, come home super late. I think I would see him like if my mom ever brought me to the job site would be the only time I saw him. But I don't remember any of that stuff. So to me, he's always been around. He's always been there. And I think seeing, like having that first business so he knows I can make this work. I think when the second business, even during like the beginning parts of it, he was confident because he knew, or he knew enough to go, I've done this before. I can do this again. So it was never like all right, guys, we're going to cut out food. I mean, and we did do stuff where it was like, all right, guys, we're not going out to dinner anymore. Every meal is going to be a home cooked meal.
You had a big family too.
Well, there's 6 of us.
Yeah.
I mean, I have 3 siblings, so it's relatively, like compared to your family.
Yeah, it was just 4 of us.
Yeah, but compared to your dad's family, it's it's a little different.
22 aunts and uncles, no big deal.
Yeah. So we never had that side of things. So I really can't complain about didn't have food on the table, had to give up my whole childhood. So that's, I mean, like, so what do you bring with that? Like nowadays, like you grew up with, you in essence did.
Yeah, that was my life, like half of my life basically. Because that was my problem, I would argue with my parents a lot about it, even though they're like, you need to be here for the shop, like to bring people in and cash people out, whatever. And I regret that. I mean, I was a teenager going through puberty. I was angry, irritated all the time. But like what I take from it is like, I'm just thankful for my parents. Nowadays, I try to get along with my parents. I'm not as angry and irritated as I was as a 13-year-old kid. But yeah, I just try to be more thankful. I know where they're coming from. It's all love. So yeah.
Okay, so let's wrap this up with a takeaway. So for you grew up in a business, in a family where the business is everything.
Yes.
It dictates the food on your table. It dictates if you get to go out. If there's a, because most of these contractors have kids. They have young kids, and they're trying this contracting thing out. What would be one piece of advice from the child, because you've been in that situation, that somebody should do to help with the situation, to help not bring the frustration of running around and giving out bids all the time and separating that? Is there even anything that they can do about that?
So is this like if they worked with the
family?
family?
Just imagine like you're talking to a new contractor. They're like, look, I've got a couple kids. They're young. I want to do the family thing, but I also want this business to grow. And you growing up in this world as a kid, you've seen the other side of things. So you know what it's like to live and, have fun and that kind of stuff. Is there anything that with your story you regret? Like, do you wish your parents would let you go out more? Or
there were times when my parents would, like, on the weekends, like, I got to do one drill meet one time for ROTC, and my mom gave that to me, or we would have, like, a field day for ROTC, so my mom would let me do that once in a while. So I'd say, let them be kids once in a while, but explain to them, like, because, the business is helping the family out with the food and roof over their head. Like, explain to them, sit them down, like, hey, this is the situation, and, like, you helping out, it's a big deal. Like, what you're doing is helping the family out a lot, and like hopefully in the long run when you're older you can understand this more. And so just like speaking to them, even though they're kids, maybe they'll understand it then or maybe way later, but just talk it out. That's always me. Like I'm a big I'm huge on communication. So I mean, some kids might be like, oh, they might still like have a fit, but like and you're the parent in a way, so hopefully they'll listen to you and follow along. And then once they get older, they'll be like, oh, in the end it was for everybody.
Right.
Like, yeah.
Okay. I like that. So just be transparent about the big picture in essence, and go, this is what we're trying to build. That's every small business when they're trying to hire somebody, they don't have the means to hire somebody. All they can do is just sell somebody on the vision. Just go, look, I can't pay you the $100K salary to come in and be my foreman or my helper, but this is where we're going, and I want to take you there with me. So it's kind of like just sell the vision.
Yeah, I think because truthfully, for at least on my side, I felt my parents, I knew what they were doing, but they didn't explain it to me all the way, like how I would hope they would. But I didn't vision that until years later, after I was done with high school. I was like, oh, this is what this was the picture. They wanted us to have a better future, have more opportunities than what they had coming from a third world country. And they're very happy right now. They have a grandson. The kids they're doing what they love to do. They're out of the house finally. So yeah, that was the vision.
Cool, man. Well, Laura, thank you for coming on today.
Yeah, thank you.
Was this
for
fun?
having me.
Was this as hard as you thought it was gonna be?
No, it was more of the cameras making me nervous, but I think I'm doing fine.
Cool. Well, guys, thanks for checking this one out. If you want to learn how to continue to grow your business, that's where that contractorgrowthnetwork.com blueprint program comes in. Go check it out. We just had our first webinar on Monday. It was all about how to sell the value, how to take all the great stuff that you're doing and actually show people this is why you're worth what you're worth. Laura, thank you.